and never take the higher road. There's no hope for a narcissist, that's what I'm told. Trying to be the bigger person, man, it gets so old. And just hope for something to put her in check. And smash that ego, bring her down to reality where sanity is found. Instant karma, instant karma, instant karma, so I can see her crashing.
Hey. So today I thought I would cover something that I utilized in my case, which is a reference judge. So I thought I would explain what a reference judge is, at least in my case, and just cover it as an option and as a possibility or something you might run into in a high conflict family custody case. So a reference judge is basically a private judge who probably was a lawyer. Mine is a retired judge, and it's somebody you hire on basically to be a judge for your case outside of the circuit court. Why it was recommended to me from an attorney I had was because we had high conflict custody, and so we were in court often. Also, I'm in a different state than the mother of my daughter, and so I'm over 1,000 miles away. So traveling back and forth is complicated. In the circuit court, you petitioner, whoever files motions, and then goes into circuit court. You get put on the docket. There's a certain time frame people have to respond, and then there's a certain time frame that the court has to get you on the docket, get your case filed so that you can appear before the judge. So an attorney I had recommended a reference judge because we had so many petitions before the court, the majority of them filed by my daughter's mother, and a lot of mine were just responses to hers. So in a circuit court, sometimes they'll give you, for high conflict, what they consider a full day in court. For us was, I think the longest hearing I got in a circuit court was about 4 hours, maybe 4.5 hours, which is pretty long. So typically they'll give you a half day. If they don't know your case at all, they'll just schedule you for a couple hours. And if you've been in court, sometimes just getting court started, one side presenting, there's proper procedure. So petitioner goes first. You get a chance to respond. They call witnesses. You get to question, cross-examine their witnesses. You get to bring your own witnesses, present your side. So that whole thing, proper procedure, can take 2 hours, can go away in just like that, especially in high conflict custody cases. So the attorney that I had at that point, I don't have an attorney for the majority of my time in these courts. I'm in propria persona, sui juris. I represent myself basically. But when I've had an attorney on 3 occasions, and the last attorney I had was the one who recommended the reference judge, and the reason he did so was so that I didn't have to go out to Oregon, do 3 hours in a hearing, not complete the trial, and then have to reschedule on the docket. Sometimes if you don't finish, it could be 3 months later before you get back before the judge. So as a parent, especially if you're the non-custodial parent, you're the parent who's removed, much less if we get into parental alienation, that 3-6 months, I've had a time where it took almost a year to get back before the judge. So that interim time can be heart-wrenching, if you're away from your child, if you're waiting for some justice or something like that. So the point of the reference judge was that a private judge who's not on the docket can basically give you a full day or 2 days in a row if you know going into it that it's going to be high conflict and could likely take over 1 full day. It's a private judge, so you have to pay him hourly, where in the circuit court, You pay the filing fees and then the state offers it to the people. So that's probably the main difference, is you're going to have to pay out of pocket. Our case, we split it 50-50 between mother and myself. All things considered, it wasn't crazy expensive. It's probably less than paying an attorney. And that doesn't always help the situation when bills are adding up and it's one more bill that you feel you should be offered by the state free of charge. But nobody forced me into it. I requested the reference judge myself based on the advice from an attorney. So, I don't have an ethical problem with the concept of a reference judge. If it benefits you, then you should look into it. The pros are, you could be heard 2 days in a row quickly. They're supposed to have open time, so even getting on the so-called docket, getting before the judge, is supposed to be faster than in circuit court. That wasn't necessarily the case in my experience, because this judge was traveling in Europe on multiple occasions. Sometimes it would take him 6 to 8 weeks to respond to our paperwork or our emailing him. Some other things that were, I don't know if out of the ordinary is the word to use, but he would offer us conference calls to kind of get everybody on the same page. Or when it came to scheduling a court hearing date, we would have these conference calls where it would be me, my daughter's mother's attorneys, and the judge. Some aspects of this were very beneficial in just expediting time, getting a case scheduled for hearing quickly and efficiently, and picking a date that actually works for you. In our case, the judge would ask us both to offer dates that we had open, and then we would coordinate through the judge and pick a date that worked for everybody. The negative side of that was none of these conference calls were ever on the record. And so the judge, I probably, in the last 2.5 years that I've had this reference judge, I've had 3 or 4 conference calls, none of them on the record. There's no, when you're thinking of a court of record, there's no recording going on. There's no transcript you can order. And the judge has made comments and statements about our case, things that he expects, opinions that he has on how he would rule, what we're looking at. And it was very informal, which in some aspects I appreciated, but in some aspects there's things that he said that I can't call him out on or hold him accountable to, because there's no transcript and there's no record of it. So I have a big problem with that. My case right now, I'm about to go back to court. We've been filing and petitioning with this reference judge. He actually just recused himself today of our case. Part of the reason I felt inspired to just talk about a reference judge, it was on my mind. And so he basically quit with very little explanation. They don't offer you, or you're not entitled to any explanation, really. And I have mixed feelings, because I'm going back in a circuit court. It will get me back in front of a different judge who might have a fresh perspective. And I do understand it's called familiarity, that they could become biased or have preconceived notions about petitioner or respondent based on the amount of time they've spent looking at your case. And I can understand that, why they could become less objective going into another hearing with parents who they've, had to watch battle for. In my case, we've had this guy for probably 2.5 years. And so it's kind of a catch-22. He's familiar with the case, which I feel like is a good thing, especially going into this present round of battling. And he, in my mind, he could see a pattern developing. But I also understand how that could start to skew being objective. So, I feel torn. I feel both ways about it. Ultimately, I've learned to go with the flow, because throwing a fit, having a pity party for yourself has rarely helped me advance, stay focused on the points, stay focused on my objective, what I'm asking for, what I would like to argue, and what the best argument is. So I'm not sweating it too much at this point, but that has come from years of learning about the court system, accepting the pros and cons, the faults and shortcomings of family courts, as well as the benefits of having some system there to deal with, especially when you're dealing with parental alienation, having something that could bear witness, offer justice, offer some legal precedence for enforcement if you're a good parent. Been watching The Proper Person and on YouTube. If you don't know him, go check him out. He's got a great success case for a good parent who has had victory. Took him years and years, which is troublesome and heartbreaking, but some things are really complicated, and there's not always a quick, easy fix. A reference judge isn't going to be a quick, easy fix to a high conflict custody case. So with all things, expect pros and expect cons. And that's why we do these videos, is just to try to educate so people know what they're getting into, so they can make better decisions. Knowledge is potential power, and the more knowledge we have, the better choices we can make, hopefully. So that's why I try to do these. That's why I'm doing this, just to offer basic information about what a reference judge is, and the pros and cons and obstacles, benefits that I've faced having one. So I'm trying to do shorter videos. Watching The Proper Person, he's got great, pretty short, concise videos. And so I'm going to try to do less of, what would be podcasting only over video, and do more shorter attention span videos for the public. So hopefully you can get something beneficial out of it. If you have any questions, things you want me to expand on, other topics that you'd like me to cover in my experience, I've been in the family courts for 5 years. Just let me know, comment, send me a private message, and I'll consider it for a video in the future. So reference judge, I looked it up in Black's Law. It wasn't in there. It is a real thing, and I'm sure there's information out there on it. I had never heard of it until year 2 in the family court system. And so that's why I'm offering it to you as information and a potential tool, whatever your situation is in family court. I'm only addressing family court. I don't know about criminal court or things outside of that when it comes to a reference judge. So I'm speaking strictly on behalf of a parent who's in high conflict family custody court. So that's my video on a reference judge. For what it's worth, any parent who's in family courts, much less high custody, high conflict family custody courts, my heart and support and good energy goes out to you. So I hope this is useful. That's it for now. Peace and love.
It's all coming together right here now. It's all coming together right here now. It's all coming together right here. Who's that? It's love. Can you feel it coming through that? Conscious revolutionary music. Yeah, you can